Welcome to the Created Worthy podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're here. On this show, I talk about creative processing and how to utilize it as a skill to bring peace, joy, and freedom into our chaotic lives. I also sit down with the most incredible guests as they share their stories, many of which for the very first time. We are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today, I am joined by another worthy warrior, Lyneé Lopez. Lyneé is an educational architect and the founder and CEO of Verve Early Childhood Consulting. Her team-building approaches and productive collaborations have secured millions in grant funding for New York City's pre-K for all startup programs. Her efforts have allowed over 50,000 students to access high-quality preschool programs at no cost. In 2017, she extended her commitment to equitable education globally by hosting teacher leadership trainings in Haiti. Lyneé is a member of the Momentum Education community where she developed her passion for transformational leadership. She is also the host of her new podcast, Café Verve, which interviews innovative leaders around the world on their community impact. I also had the honor of being a guest on her podcast just a few weeks ago. We will have that in the show notes for sure. So back in August, I was actually introduced to Lyneé, and we quickly got to work rebranding her business to reflect who she is and not just what she does. Lyneé is a trustworthy, creative, and optimistic woman with so much wisdom within her, and it has been an honor to work with and quickly become friends with such a beautiful soul inside and out. Welcome, Lyneé, to the Created Worthy podcast.
Thank you so much. That was so sweet, that bio and intro, and thank you.
Oh,
I'm so
of
happy to be
course.
here.
It's so fun to have you here. I was on your show. Now you're on mine. Like, here we are. We're doing the thing.
I love it.
So I would love for you to just start with a bit about where you're from and where your passions all started from.
Yeah. So I grew up in Ventnor, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Atlantic City, New Jersey. So lots of folks know about Atlantic City. So if you travel to Atlantic City and you chose to go what we call down beach, then you would hit Ventnor, Margate, Longport. Margate is the house of Lucy the elephant, in case anybody knows any landmarks.
Ooh.
Yes. So I grew up there. So I really grew up very, very close to the ocean, and really lived a life that was always surrounded sort of by nature and being able to be outside. And so that's where I grew up, and I loved it there. And the beach is a part of my life. I don't feel like I could ever be too far from it. So everywhere I've traveled in my journey, in my almost 50 years, I'll actually be 50 December 2nd.
Wow. Well, happy early birthday. That's just a couple weeks away from when we're recording.
Yes. So I'll be 50. And so in my 50 years of life, anywhere I've lived, it has always been a stone's throw from the beach. So it's pretty solid that I'll most likely be living near the beach the rest of my life.
You're a beach gal.
I am. And my passion. So I would say, when I think back to like, when I evaluate like my life and where I am now, and I start to like connect the dots back, because that's sort of my approach to telling my story. The one thing that kind of comes up is I was very much into sports from a very early age. And I feel like, so I started figure skating when I was 7 years old. Yes.
A beach gal who likes to figure skate. Wow.
Yes.
And, how fun.
And I loved it. And I was a figure skater. I actually went pro when I was 16 years old and started teaching. That was my first teaching experience when I was 16 years old. I was teaching little kids how to skate.
Aww.
Which was super cool. I also played softball, which I loved. That was very much a part of my life. So, and I was also a cheerleader until 8th grade, religiously every year. And what that really taught me was a couple of things: the commitments, honoring your commitments, right? Because there are some times that you get involved in things and you really don't want to see them through for whatever reason. It's not working out. But I feel like my experiences with being on a team, and my mom also just always saying, well, that's fine, but you still need to honor your commitment that you made for this season or for this team or things like that. So definitely commitment and honoring commitments. Teamwork, right? Working in a team and figuring out the strengths of a team, and then also when you need to support someone else, right? Because we're not all good at all the things. So if you're
Mhm.
going to be a good team, you're going to have to kind of ebb and flow. And also, I think confidence, like, which also has propelled me to be able to do some of the things in my life that were uncharted. I think being in sports really helped that, because especially figure skating, because a lot of times in competition, I was on my own. I was literally, you skate out alone and do your
Right.
routine.
It's a little bit
Um,
different of a team
yeah,
approach. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think those core values really have been pretty much a staple in my life that has sort of traveled with me through all the things that I've been through and created and will create.
Yes. Okay. I love that. And having those staples to look back on and connect the dots, that's a really important part of even sharing your story or feeling called to share your story. When you can look back and be like, whoa, these things have been important to me from the time I can even remember. And this is how they've shown up in my life. And now this is how they show up in my life now. Um, that's a really special thing.
Yeah.
So, generally speaking, how was your childhood? Like, what was your childhood like?
So my childhood, I would say I had a good childhood. I had, my mom was a staple in my life. My mom was actually married 3 times in her lifetime. So my father was her first marriage. They were divorced when I was 3. So from the time I was 3 on, my mom and my dad were separate. And that so I would go and visit him on the weekends, like on Sundays. That was our day. And so that was sort of my life with my dad, most of my adolescence. And then my mom remarried and I had a stepdad. And that was also a great life. They had a son together who was my brother. And so I grew up in this house that was very we my mom worked, my dad worked, so it was sort of turnkey in the sense of I would come home from school and kind of be on my own for a while, and like,
Mhm.
how that all looked for us back in like the 80s. I played a lot of sports. I got good grades most of the time. I would say though, I kind of learned later in life, I learned like exactly what I had to do to get the good grades so that I could kind of like play the line, shall we say,
Yeah.
as
Do
like
the
the
bare minimum.
yeah,
Yeah.
when needed, right? My grandparents were very much a part of my life and they lived very close to us. So I really got the joy of spending a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandfather was a charter boat captain.
Oh,
And so I spent a lot of time around boats, and his boat where we lived until I was 12, we lived 2 doors in from the bay, and his boat docked right around the corner from us. So I would hear him coming in because he would blow the horn, right? And then my brother and I
oh,
would like run to the dock and, like look at the, baby ducks and watch him fillet fish and all that crazy
yeah.
fisherman stuff. But it was, I would say it was a pretty normal childhood. And I would say the interesting thing looking back, because I didn't know differently, but like as I moved into my adult life and learned of folks that weren't together and were divorced and trying to figure out the dynamic of children and visitations and all that, I was really blessed in the sense that my mom and dad didn't have what I would say a close relationship. They really didn't talk a lot. It was a very like transactional type of relationship they had after they got divorced. But when it came to me, when I spent time with my dad, it was always very loving. Like I felt like I had double of everything. So like I got to have Christmas twice
Mm-hmm.
and I got to have Easter twice. And I think about that because I am divorced now. And I went through that about 10 years ago. And that really informed the vision of what I wanted it to look like for my kids when their dad and I weren't going to be together, and that it actually it could be good. It didn't have to be so heavy and horrible and problematic and all those things. I mean, of course, those things were in there because you're dealing with human dynamics.
Yes, for
But
sure.
at the heart of it, my experience in my childhood was not a negative one when it came to the separation of my mom and dad.
Okay. That's really good. I think that it's so common, and I'm walking through this right now with my own daughter. And I was never married to her dad, but we have had quite a tumultuous relationship. And I think just trying to figure out how we best love and support her, and same thing, do holidays, make it so like she can just be a kid and focus on that. And I think it's really easy for us as adults, the ones who are dictating essentially how these dynamics play out, for us to be caught in our own feelings and forget about the fact that this has, whatever happened between you and that other person has absolutely nothing to do with your
Yeah.
children. And you don't want them to feel like it did, because
Yeah.
yeah.
Because and to say that, I realized pretty young, like my mom, when she would talk about my dad, and she didn't talk about him a lot, but when she would tell the story, her story of her
Hmm.
experience of him, it was not a good one. And but I realized really early that that was not the experience that I was having. And I think that
Yeah.
the value of that lesson early on really kind of was a good thing, because I didn't have to adopt someone else's story. I could actually I could experience my own and make my own sort of judgments.
Right.
And when I was going through, the transition with my kids from their dad and I being together to us not being together, stuff comes up. Like they would come to me with things, and they didn't like this, or, whatever the circumstance were.
Hmm.
He didn't buy the right milk. I don't know. Whatever those were, like
Yeah.
I would hear about them, right?
So many preferences.
So many. So, but the joy of that was I could sit with them and say, okay, well, you need to talk to him about that. Like you need to have that conversation. And for him, there was things that came up between him and I, and, sometimes he didn't always feel like I was supporting certain things for him. And, I said to him, listen, your relationship with your kids is now completely your own relationship. You need to build that. So, whatever that you want that to look like, you actually have to put the work into it to get it.
Yeah. So just to go back a few steps, can you tell me about starting your family? Did you always know that you wanted to be a mom?
Oh my gosh, yes. I always wanted to have kids. I'm actually in education now, and which is ironic because I work around kids now all the time,
Mhm.
but I never saw that for myself. I really saw me being a mom pretty early on. And, I was also an older sister. So there was some of that in there, where my brother and I were 4 years apart. So we were close in age, but still kind of not, you
Yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah, when you're 4, you can go help change the diaper, or you
yeah,
you kind of feel like it's your baby.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Even like when you're 8 and they're 4, like you still
Yeah.
can play together and have fun, but you're still kind of like the older looking out for
Mhm.
them,
Yeah.
mothering kind of figure. But yeah, I did always know that I wanted to be a mom, and I have 3 children.
Okay.
So my daughter, Gabriella, I was 26 when I had
Yes, I
her.
forgot that we both have a Gabriella.
Yes. Yes, yes. I call mine Gabby and you call yours Ella, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yes. But although she could change that, the other day she came home and she's like, "Some kids call me Gabby." And I was like, "Do you like that?" And she's like you could tell she did, but she was like, "No." I was like, "Well, it kind of fits you."
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Hey.
But yeah, I mean, right. I've called her Ella forever, but we'll see how she ends up.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you the story before how I tried to make her nickname Ella and everybody kept calling her Gabby. So she became Gabby.
Oh, that's right.
And my youngest child is Isabella. I tried it again. I tried to do the Ella again. It did not work. She's
Oh
Izzy.
my gosh. I love that though. Izzy is such a cute nickname. So you've
Oh,
got Gabriella, you've got Izzy, and then
and Daniel.
and
Daniel.
Daniel. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Danielle, look it. We are like connected in ways we had no idea.
So true. So true.
Oh my gosh.
So
So,
yeah, I had her when I was 26.
okay. So you had your oldest when you were 26.
Yes.
Okay. And then how far
And
apart in age are they?
Gabby and Danny are 4 years apart.
Okay.
And then Danny to Isabella, no, I'm sorry. Gabby to Danny are 3 years apart. Danny to Isabella are 4.
Okay.
So, I had them over a span of 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you were raising your small children, did you have like one certain quality that you were like, I want to make sure that my children know this, or that you teach them this lesson? What is that
Mhm.
most important quality that you have tried to instill in your own children?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of them. But I would say kindness.
Hmm.
And sort of the wrapping on kindness is really being with people in connection, really like really sitting with people and being with them in the moment and trying to understand, having empathy,
Yeah.
and looking at that your version of what you see isn't the only version, right?
Right.
It's not the only story, it's not the only bit of information. I would say carrying that forward into their teen years, because now they are 15, almost 20, and almost 22.
Wow.
That lesson now looks like, taking, like, when people give you, like, say things like, have a reaction to you or a reaction to something you did, or they give you feedback, that it is feedback, it doesn't make it true. And
Mhm.
that's really important to me, because I don't want them to get wrapped up in what other people think of them as
Yeah.
their identity, and really trying to keep them grounded in who they knew they are and what brings them joy. And then, of course, if someone has a misconception, or they're having an experience of them that isn't a good one, that they have the power to shift that, right,
Right.
and have a conversation about it.
Yes. I love that. Those are really powerful lessons that I think we all need to be take note of and teach our children and keep in mind. What is the most important lesson that you've learned from being a mother?
Oh man, you got to duck and weave.
Oh, yes, I love that. Yes. For
Yeah,
sure. Man, they change every single day, don't they?
it's so true. It's so true.
Mm.
I mean, my children have taught me so much. I would say, I mean, I've learned so many lessons, and my children teach me lessons all the time. I mean, we now are at a point in our lives where I feel like we are supporters of each other. It's
Mhm.
not like kind of a one-sided relationship. It really is a two-way relationship that we have now. And my capacity for love of them, and seeing them and like holding their best selves, has really been a big lesson, because the other part of it is we have our own sort of, as parents, and I'll speak for myself as a mom, like, you have your vision of what you want your kids to be and do, and like, kind of like when you dream about like what you want your wedding to look like, like you have these dreams for your kids. And I think one of the things I've definitely learned, and I've been learning this lesson for the past couple of years, is really the ability to let go,
Mm.
and to really honor who their own story.
Yeah.
Because I feel like as a mom for a certain amount of time, like I kind of shared the narrative with them, right? Because we're like, I'm raising them and they're kind of under my guide. And so we have this like
Mhm.
shared story, but there's a point, and I don't know, I wasn't looking for the point. I don't know if I expected the point. I don't know what happened. But at some point I realized like I'm no longer the leader of this story and I have to honor the paths that they're choosing to take.
Right. And love and support them through what
Yes.
is their life and their
Yes.
decisions. And yes. So, at what point did you start your career? Were you a mother? Like, had you already had your children when you had started?
I did. So I actually went to college. When I entered college, I thought I was going to be an oceanographer
Oh,
because
wow.
I was, there's the beach thing.
Yeah.
I love the ocean. I was very active in a lot of science classes and research projects in high school. So when I went to college, I went in as, a marine science major.
Mhm.
And I actually failed out my first semester. Like there are
Really?
other circumstances around that, but I pretty much just blew it my first semester.
Oh, no.
And I ended up going, back to school. I took a semester off, went back to school, and I went back for art history, believe it or not. And I graduated with an art history degree. And I was probably around 23 ish around then. Um, and I couldn't find a job in it. So when I met um, who, my boyfriend, who then became my husband, we lived in Florida at the time. And I started to look for something else to do because I was working in restaurants. And, restaurants in Florida are a little weird because, it's just when you come from Atlantic City where you have a consistent customer base and then you go to Florida where it's not always consistent, it was a very strange way to make a living. So I started to look for other things, and it turned out that I ended up volunteering for a mental health association program that was associated with schools. So I actually went and I was a mentor for a year to two young girls. And from that, I kind of like realized how much I loved being with kids and like just being there for them and helping them. So I started looking for a job in education, and I got a job and I worked as a teaching assistant. And then I ended up working as a teacher by default because in Florida, you can work as a special ed teacher with any degree because it's considered an
Oh,
emergency certification because there's such a need.
okay.
So the school I was working for found out I had my bachelor's degree and they're like, hey, we need a teacher. So that's actually how I started teaching. And then I went back to school and got my teaching certification. But I got my teaching certification while I had two kids. So I was
Wow.
teaching full time with two young kids, and I went back to school to get my teacher certification.
Wow. And did your
So,
kids go to the school that you were teaching at?
yes, they did.
Okay.
Yep, they did. So that's kind of how my career started. My educational career started when I was about 25, I'd say. And I've been in that field now for 25 years
Yeah.
almost.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, what led you to taking that to a different level and starting your own business?
Yeah. That's a really fun story and a lot of craziness
Ooh.
in that story. So I was a teacher for about 5 years, and I loved it. And then my youngest daughter, Isabella, I got pregnant with her, and she was actually a high risk pregnancy. And I had to take time away from teaching. At the time, I was just substitute teaching, but it was like long term. I was trying to get a job in a district. And so I had to kind of step away. And when I was able to go back to work, I had a lot of trouble finding a position. I had looked for a while and I really wasn't finding anything. I wasn't getting any callbacks. So I started looking at early childhood director positions because I saw a lot of those. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I could do that. Like I think I'm a natural born leader. Like I'm passionate about education. I'm a quick learner. I'm going to apply. And I got the job. So Yeah. So I went
Yay.
from being a teacher into being now an administrator of a program. And I did that for about 5 years. And I also loved that. I loved building teams and working with families. And I learned a ton about just running an early childhood program and also like the back scenes of things, like how to look at a P&L and do staff evaluations and funding and like all this other businessy stuff. But back in 2013, the beginning of that year, the company that I was working for came to me and said, listen, we're actually closing this program and we're not telling anyone because we have a rollout of things we need to do. We're not going public with it yet, but you're the highest paid person and we're bringing in a closing team. And so you're basically the first to go. Yeah. So I was like
Wow.
devastated because, well, one, I'm losing my job, which is like, what? But the second part of that was that I had put a lot of passion and love into building that team. And it felt a lot like I was abandoning them. And that really like didn't sit well with me.
Right.
But I took it as a blessing. They were giving me severance pay, which is amazing. And at the time, my mom was actually dying of throat cancer.
Oh
So
no.
sort of this thing happening with work turned into a blessing of time because I was actually free now to spend a lot more time with my mom, which I ended up doing, and she passed in May of that year. But on the in between of that, so I left at the end of January. That was my last day, and a week later, the job I just left called me back, and they said, "Hey, listen, you're being specially requested on a in New York City, and they only want you." Yeah. And I was like, well, I don't
Okay.
work for you anymore. So they're like, we can work it out, whatever. So I ended up going back to do subcontracting work, which I loved because I made my own hours. I could have off when I needed, and I got top dollar, which are all the good things that we all want, right?
Right.
Time freedom, control over your schedule,
Yeah.
and top dollar, right? So I did that for a while and I really loved it. And it allowed me to make good money, do what I loved, and spend time with my family, and my mom in particular. And that summer, the beginning of that summer, I went to their end of year training, and I met this woman, and she's talking to me about what I'm doing. And she said, "Hey, do you have business insurance?" I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do I need business insurance? And she's like, well, you're a subcontractor, you really are kind of your own business now. And so now I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I do? Like, I need to like figure this out. So I took no business classes in college, zero. But I ended up finding my local small business development center in my county, and I took a couple classes with them over the summer. And I learned a lot of things that I didn't know before. And then that November, actually November 26th, so this coming November, we'll be celebrating our business birthday.
Yay.
I opened the business and legally certified it, and it was an LLC. And honestly, it was so that I could have business insurance.
So
Honestly.
yeah, tell us a little bit about business insurance because I'm sitting here like, what's that?
Yeah. So it basically business insurance is just protection if anyone ever sues you, basically, is what it is.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And there's, as far as needing what you need, it depends on your what career you're in and what level of, I don't know, risk, I guess, because insurance is
Right.
always about risk, what level of risk and all that stuff. So the business insurance, yes, got me in the door to open a legitimized business. And then a week later, I got a call from the woman who requested me that January to work on this special project. And she said, "Hey, listen, we're doing this really big grant writing project, and we'd like you to be the project manager." And I said, "Okay, but I have a business now, so you'll have to contract with the business." And that's how I signed my first $20,000 contract within a week of opening my business.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
That's
pretty cool.
incredible. So you just kind of explained that there was a season where you were just trying to figure out what the next step was, but How did you get through that? Like even just mentally, emotionally, when you didn't know what you were going to do next. I think that that's something that a lot of people are facing, especially unfortunately right now, you know, where our world is at. A lot of people are either they've been entrepreneurs, or they've had jobs, they've lost jobs, or they're stuck in something that just doesn't feel in alignment with what they feel called to.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd love for you to just give a little bit of advice to the listener out there who's sitting in a similar season as you faced when you lost your job. How did you get through that?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things there. One, I think, is always being open to possibilities, and also knowing that things don't have to be permanent. Like I was very willing, and it was a very real possibility. And it always is standing there for me, even as an entrepreneur going into her 10th year, that I may have to pivot, right? I may have to step away from a piece of the business if it's not profitable, to go back into a more, the more mainstream workforce if I
Right.
had to. So I think it was always just looking for being open, I think was huge, to the possibilities. I think like telling people, just networking, like talking to people, because I feel like that's how we always get our jobs. Like,
Oh, for sure.
right?
Connection.
Like,
Yeah.
so, talking to people, sharing what you're looking for. I think also being clear. The thing that became really clear for me in that 6 months, that January to June, which was just very crazy, um, was just you have to just keep moving forward.
Mm.
Every day getting up and keep moving forward. The other piece that I didn't share with you yet is October, the end of October of that year is when my husband at the time and I separated.
Wow.
So on top of all of that, we had separated. He had moved out of the house. So I was also dealing with those emotions. And I feel like as soon as that happened, because I had already like lost a job, lost my mom, and now I was losing my husband and that relationship. At that moment, I was really clear I needed therapy. Like I knew that I was not going to be able to negotiate anything else on my plate without someone else sort of supporting me.
Yeah.
Um, because also who I am as a person is like, I feel like I'm a very strong person, and I'm usually the person that holds it together for many other people. Like I'm the person that people come to for that, which is fine. Like I've learned how to support myself in that. But the other thing is like I wanted to be strong for my kids because I knew they were also going through so much. And I'm not saying that this was right, but I really didn't want to break down in front of them. And I'm not saying looking back now that that was the right thing to do, but at that moment, it felt like what I needed to do. So therapy for me allowed me to to let go, cry, scream, curse,
Yeah.
whatever emotions
To
that I was
process.
feeling week. And I went religiously every week for a full year. And then after that, I still continued to go regularly, just not weekly.
Hmm.
Is really working through all of that. And I had an amazing therapist, because I would say I'm a difficult person to be like for you to be my therapist, because I'm pretty savvy, and I feel like I think things through, and I definitely can argue my point, right? I'm really good at that. My mom would probably say you probably should have been a lawyer, but I needed someone that could stand up to that
Hmm.
and could say, I hear you, and those are all valid, but let's consider this.
That sounds a lot like a conversation I actually had with my therapist. I've been in therapy for, gosh, like 12 years consistently. But a few years back, I think maybe 3 years ago, it was just clear that I needed to switch therapists. Not because my old therapist was not great; she was great, but she just wasn't the right person for that season. Like it kind of gotten to the point in our
Yeah.
therapy relationship where it was like, I need more help than she was able to give me.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes I say like finding the right therapist can be like finding a car, right? Like finding the right car cuz like you got to test drive it for a little bit, and like it takes perseverance cuz you end up sharing your story multiple times. But thankfully, I found a therapist who was referred to me again by connection, and she one of the very first conversations I had with her was, I'm a bulldozer. How can you help me? Like,
Mm-hmm.
can you get into here? Because like I'm gonna talk to you. I'm gonna just be like, okay, this is what happened this week, and I'm just gonna dictate the therapy session when really I need her to be like, let's talk about that more. Like, let's
Yeah.
unpack this. Let's see where this is coming from. Like, and yeah, and call and kind of call me out at times, like, yeah, I understand. I hear what you're saying. I validate you, but also let's think about this from a different perspective because there
Yeah.
might be a healthier way to approach whatever said issue is.
Or just something you can't see. We
Yeah,
have blind spots.
for
And,
sure.
I think when you have a good therapist, they're able to see the big picture and they're able to kind of project a future that's
Definitely.
healthy. And their job is to sort of help you get to that version,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know? So yeah, so she was wonderful. And so I would say therapy for sure was huge for me. I mean, I still see my therapist sometimes when I have things that come up, because now I'm very aware of my triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when I'm getting triggered a lot, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't, my strategies aren't working. Like I need to go
Yeah.
see her. Um, so yeah, so she's on speed dial, so which I love.
Same. So is mine. I love that. So, just to wrap up the conversation about your career, is there anything that you're really looking forward to in this next phase of your career?
Yeah,
Tell me about it.
so so what I will say is, so from that year I built a $1 million business, which ended up being able to give me financial peace. It gave me the ability to provide for my kids in a way that I wanted to. And it also gave me time freedom, which all were important things to me because raising my kids, like their dad was of course around, but I was the custodial parent. So I had them all the time. So, it was really important to me that I went to their games after school and I went to the things that were important to them, and I was home at night, and not only that I was there, but I was present and I had energy. So really the past 10 years has been sort of building that, and I've been really happy and grateful that I was able to build that and also do work that was super impactful. I mean, such a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
As I kind of move into this next phase, I'm really I've been working a lot in a one-on-one capacity with clients, a very curated, focused approach, which has been wonderful. But I'm really looking now to work with more groups and all over the world, right? Like instead of in this little nook where I've been doing a lot of work in New York City and New Jersey, is really kind of expanding that work and really having more of a global impact, and influence, and support for early childhood around the US and around the globe. So I'm building systems for that. And those systems will be more of a shift to doing more online support and coaching and things like that. So that's what I'm building right now. And I'm super excited about that.
That is exciting. Oh my gosh. I think, okay, so I didn't actually look up, what is it, the Holisty Manifesto? Is that
Oh,
what you
yes, yes,
mentioned?
yes.
But could you read that to us?
I actually have it right here.
Perfect. Look at you. You're prepared.
I'm
Yes,
prepared.
I would love for you to read that.
Yes, of course. So it's a little long, but here we go. This is your life. Do what you love and do it often. If you don't like something, change it. If you don't like your job, quit. If you don't have enough time, stop watching TV. If you're looking for the love of your life, stop. They will be waiting for you when you start doing things you love. Stop overanalyzing. All emotions are beautiful. When you eat, appreciate. Life is simple. Every last bite. Open your mind, arms, and heart to new things and people. We are united in our differences. Ask the next person you see what their passion is and share your inspiring dream with them. Travel often. Getting lost will help you find yourself. Some opportunities only come once. Seize them. Life is about the people you meet and the things you create with them. So go out and start creating. Life is short. Live your dream and share your passion.
Wow. I understand why that's your favorite quote now. There's
I
like
love it so much.
each individual line of that is a power statement, a reminder of truth and what we need. What Where did you find that?
I went through a phase back probably about 13 years ago where I started watching a lot of motivational videos and like reading a lot of motivational work and looking for motivational quotes. And that's sort of how I found this one. And I loved it so much that I framed it. I actually have done trainings around this quote with teachers,
Wow.
which was very impactful. And this, so it's in a little, like you can see, it's a little like 8x11. So my light's a little bright, but this actually sat on our dining room table. It's still in my living room, but it sat on our dining room table for a good 8 years. I'm a really big believer in like positive, like self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been really aware of the impact of that for many, many years now. So it's important to me that I like, one, that I practice it, two, that I help my kids practice it, and also that we just have things around us that remind us of these things. So this has been one of the staples in our home. But I have to share a story with you. So one time Isabella was reading this because we were eating dinner, and she was reading it out loud, and she goes, if you don't like your job, quit. She goes, well, what if I need money? I started
She's got a
laughing.
point.
And I was like, all right, fine, let's talk about that. So
You're like, let's unpack that a little bit.
yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. Well, I love that quote. I am gonna have to print it out as well because I need that reminder. I'm so glad that you read it out loud because there are a lot of things in there that I'm like, yep, now I need to go do some creative processing. Speaking of creative processing,
Yeah.
my definition of creative processing is to activate your creative mind to process a certain intention. So, what are a couple of ways that you create and
Mm.
process?
Um, this might sound a little crazy, but I do two things. The first thing I do is I organize. And what that does for me is it calms my brain because I put things in the places they need to be so my brain doesn't, one, it doesn't get distracted by it, and two, that it kind of like lets me forget about it
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, right? So I do that with lists a lot. Like as I start to think things or I think of ideas and things like that, if I don't write it down, or if I don't write it down, it will continue to run the reel in my brain. So I need to kind of get it down on paper so that I can it can be held for me and I can return to it when I have more time to kind of sit with it. The other thing that I do is I walk and I talk. I love to walk. And I know for me, walking, the act of walking sort of calms me emotionally a lot of times, or at least centers me. And then I talk out loud to myself. And that really helps me because I kind of talk through like what I'm feeling, what I want to happen, maybe even some next steps, based
Yeah.
on like kind of what I say out loud to myself. And that has been a really huge part of my healing and also just my day to day. I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
So, do you consciously set an intention when you do those things, or Is that not something that you've tried?
Well, the organizing and the list making, I think is just it's just a part of my practice now. Like
Yeah.
it's a part of me getting ready for my day. So in other words, like in the morning, I have a certain routine that I do before I take any calls or I answer any emails. And that kind of organizational routine, what it does for me is it kind of it's almost like sage when you sage a room.
Mm-hmm.
Like it kind of like clears things for me so that then when I do sit down to answer a call or do this, I'm actually super present.
Okay. Can you walk us through your morning routine?
Yeah, sure. So I get up in the morning and I practice Reiki. I'm a Reiki master. So a lot of times in the morning when I wake up,
And
I
Reiki,
actually
just
lay
for those that don't know, Reiki is like an energy healing.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
So I usually lay in bed for a little while and I'll just put my hands somewhere on my body for like maybe a minute or two, or I'll hit the snooze and do it. Just to kind of give myself a little bit of self-love before I even get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
I also have rose quartz stones in my pillows that I stuck in there. So sometimes I will find them and just hold on to them for a minute to kind of get love into my day before I even get out of bed. So I do that, get up, brush my teeth, all the usual things that folks do when they get out of bed. But after I get my daughter to school, which is also a part of my routine and something I love doing because I'm present, is I honestly just put things in place. Like I make my coffee a certain way. I'm pretty much a coffee like snob in the way that I like my coffee, right? So I make my coffee a certain way. I clean my office space that I'm going to work at. I get my things organized. I can't have dishes in my sink. Like it's just weird things like that. Like I have to
Mm-hmm.
do the dishes, and all of these things are kind of like giving me some space to just think through whatever. And mentally, I'm planning what I want to get accomplished. So mentally, I'm saying, okay, today, and sometimes I do say this out loud. Okay, today, I want to be sure I'm getting to da 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 da.
Okay. So that is almost in itself creative processing.
Yeah.
That is you setting your intention and then activating your creative mind by
Yep.
verbally processing what you want to do. So
Yep.
that's really interesting. I love hearing about people's morning routines or just how you walk through life every day, because that's where I see creative processing as a thread in everybody's life. Like every single person pretty much who's been on Created Worthy, I'm like, there it is. There it
Yep.
is. You're using it every single day. And when you know better, you do better. So for me, the reason I'm passionate about creative processing is because I feel like when we know that this is something that is healthy and we can use in a positive way, this can be another tool, another coping skill in our toolbox. And we can be like, oh, if I feel off, have I done that thing that I know makes me feel better, that I know that brings me clarity, that I
Yep.
know it allows for me to have space for joy, and
Mm-hmm.
and um so yeah, thank you for sharing your routine. It's not weird at all. I'm definitely a coffee snob too. I'm another thing that I'm learning about myself in the last few years of therapy is that I am a little bit resistant to routine. Like I want to have a routine, but then I want to change it, and then I want to change it
Mm-hmm.
again, and then I want to change it again, and then I'm sitting there like, well, why doesn't anything feel secure, like stable?
Yeah.
Well, Danielle,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
I
obvious.
would say, I will say to you, I've recently been noticing that because I've been trying to walk daily. And at first was in the mornings and now it's in the afternoons. And like I kind of got caught up in that. Like I'm not doing it every day, so it's not that routine. But like I've learned to give myself grace
Mm,
and realize that like I need a routine that is giving me what I need at that moment in my
okay,
life.
I
And
love
that
that.
right? And like, so sometimes it will change.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been kind of thinking about that because sometimes when you set a routine and then you don't do it, you feel like you failed in some way. Like,
Right.
what?
For sure.
I thought I was going to be good at this and I'm not. But like, really, I've recently been thinking about this and I'm like, you know what? It's not that. It's just that I'm so in tune with what I need and I'm going to trust myself that if I need to shift it, that I will.
Yes, it's like meeting yourself where you're at and then giving
Yeah.
yourself grace there.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so last big question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who feels called towards leadership or has that, like, feels like they're an inherent leader, like you had shared earlier, but isn't sure where to start?
Well, I would say if that's what you're called to do, you must most likely are already doing it or have done it in your life. Um, so maybe spend some time sort of looking back on some of the things that you've done. Um, so when I say like I was always a leader, like even when I was teaching, how that showed up is I always had new ideas to share with my team,
Mm,
that they hadn't done, or different projects or different ways of doing things that maybe were more efficient or more inclusive. So I would say like really take inventory first. And then the second thing is just, starting in your community is always a good place to start. Like there's so many places you can volunteer, you can meet new people, and have influence, because really leadership is just about being with people, meeting them where they're at and walking alongside of them,
right.
you
I think a
know?
lot of times it gets tied in our minds to making money. And the reality is, leadership has nothing to do with making money. There's
No.
plenty of billionaires out there who are terrible leaders.
Yeah.
Terrible. But
Yeah.
there are plenty of people who don't make anything that are incredible leaders.
Yes.
And yeah, I love that reminder of reflect on what you've already walked through. I have I call them the Holy Spirit bumps, like goosebumps. I have like full body goosebumps with that because I think that's something that's so important to remember when you do feel called to be a leader. I think
Yeah.
you gotta look back on what you've done and then serve in the ways that are in front of you and
And
separate.
I'm really a big advocate of like following what you love and following what your inspirations are. And when you do that, the money will come, but if you try to flip it on its head and you're leading with money, then you kind of go down a Pandora's box of lots of things that might not go well.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I would say that, we're all leaders in some way. So yeah, look back, what are you already doing? And then really, what do you want to create? What do you want to give? What is the impact you want to have? And then where can you insert yourself to be able to support that?
Right. I love that. Well, as we wrap up here today, I know that you have some really exciting things happening in your life and business. And I know you briefly mentioned them, but is there anything you'd love to tell the listeners about, that ways that they can connect with you or ways that they can watch out for the new things that are coming up?
Yeah, sure. So I launched a podcast the end of this summer called Café Verve. We are actually wrapping up our first season, which is very exciting. I've learned a lot, so I'm super excited to kind of sit with it, evaluate what worked, create new ideas and new ways of being in season two. So that'll be coming. Season two will be posting in January. So I would love folks to come and find me there and follow the podcast. And if you get a listen, leave us a review. I also have an art scholarship in honor of my brother, Thomas McDonough. That is an annual scholarship that we award to a current high school senior or college student, and that's about to drop too. So that scholarship will open December 1st. So I will make sure that's up on my website. And yeah, come follow me on the website. The website's getting a refresh. Whoop, whoop. So hopefully that'll be up and going by the end of the year. And that's at verveconsultant.com, VERVE consultant.com. So you can come on over there and see what we're doing. And we are currently, the thing I'm really super excited about, and it's still all coming together, but I am hosting a retreat in 2023, and we will be going to Peru.
Peru, you decided.
I decided, yes.
Yay.
So we will be going to Peru, and it's going to be amazing. It will be talking about leadership and impact. We'll have an impact project. We're going to be walking alongside folks in the community. We're going to go to Machu Picchu. So lots of fun things. So you definitely want to jump over on the website and see what we're up to, so you can register too.
Yes. And we will have all of those links in the show notes. What is the best way for listeners to connect with you?
I would say the best way to connect with me is over on LinkedIn. Lyneé Lopez, Lyneee Lopez. That's probably the best way to come and follow me over there, because that's where we post all of our good stuff. And I'm also on Instagram and Pinterest and all the good things.
All the things. We'll have all of the things in her show notes. Since I've done your branding, I know your links.
Very good.
Well, Lyneé, so grateful to have spent some time with you here today and for your courage and vulnerability to share your story. Keep leading others towards the joy of learning and creating approaches that quite literally are saving lives. You, my friend, are created worthy. Thank you so much for listening to the Created Worthy podcast. If you want to connect more, you can follow along with me over at Danielle Damrell or Damrell Creative Co. on Instagram and Facebook. All the links to today's topics are in the show notes, and you can also find a link to my Patreon, which is where you can help support my mission on this show and keep it going. Ratings and reviews really do matter, so make sure to hook me up with 5-star review. Any less, I would rather hear your opinions over email. So anyway, if this episode resonated with you at all, share the love, send it to a friend, or post it on your social media. But don't forget to tag me so I see it and can share it too. I hope all of you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you on the flip side.